Hey everybody. This video is going to provide a follow-up to the Week 5 weekly discussion. So for the Week 5 discussion, you were asked to read the Declaration of Independence and answer a handful of questions about it. So obviously we're all familiar enough anyway, with the Declaration of Independence. We know what it's all about for the most part. We know when it was signed. We celebrate that day. And we may have even read parts of it before. Some of us may have actually read the entire thing at one point or another, but I think a lot of Americans probably have not read the entire Declaration of Independence. So I wanted to use it in some way, shape, or form for this course because this course is rhetorical persuasion. It's all about argument. And I personally feel like the Declaration of Independence is one of the best examples of an argument. It's almost perfection. It's so good. Um, and I don't know that many people, view it in that way. Just because it's such an integral part of who we are as Americans. Um, we might not have ever really looked at it closely to see just how powerful it is. So I'm going to go through the questions, and I can't wait to see what you guys have to say in the follow-up journal for this. So question number one is, of course, what is the issue? What's the issue that's being presented in this argument? Well, the issue, right, is in this case that why the colonies should separate from Great Britain. That's the issue at hand. That's the core of what the Declaration of Independence is about. So the claim or the thesis, which is question number two, is at the end of the second paragraph, at least what I consider to be the thesis. So the history of the present king of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. So if you think about what a claim is, what a thesis statement is, it's the statement, usually towards the beginning of the essay or the article, that clearly tells you what the argument is. And the argument here is that the colonies should separate from Great Britain because the King of Great Britain has basically instituted tyranny over the states. And then they're going to prove it with a list of facts. That's the argument. That's the thesis. That's the claim. We believe that the King of Great Britain has become a tyrant, and because of that, we are going to prove with even more facts why we should separate from Great Britain. That's what they're trying to persuade us of, right? So that leads us to question number three, which is, who is the audience? Well, they tell us right there, Jefferson tells us right there in that last sentence of the second paragraph, to prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. So their primary audience, according to what they've written, is the world. They are making this announcement, they are presenting this argument to the world, right? Now, of course, the King of Great Britain and all the citizens of Great Britain are certainly kind of narrow, focused in on as part of that candid world. But I think also the colonists here in the States, because not all of them were in favor of separating from Great Britain. So not only is Jefferson wanting to, and all the other signers of the Declaration, not only are they wanting to show this argument to the whole world, they specifically want to make sure that Great Britain hears the argument. And they also are still trying to persuade some of their own here in the States that this is necessary. Okay. So, but their primary audience is a candid world. They are putting this out there for everyone, which makes sense because what they're doing is they are declaring their independence. So the whole world up until this point has thought of the states as colonies of Great Britain. And if the colonies are going to declare their own independence and no longer be a part of Great Britain, that's something that the whole world probably needs to know about, So a candid world, specifically the King of Great Britain, and also the colonists here at home who have not been convinced yet that separating is the right thing to do, right? So question number 4 is, are there any assumptions present in the argument? Any assumptions on the part of the authors, and anything that we might be assuming as well? They're assuming, because they say up there in that first paragraph, the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. So they're assuming that we agree with their views on laws of nature and nature's God. They are assuming that we also value life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They're assuming that the list of grievances, all the facts that they submit in the whole middle section of the Declaration, they're assuming that we will also view those things as bad. And that we also value our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. So there are some very definite appeals to value in the Declaration. But I want to talk first about some of the other supporting techniques that are used in the Declaration. So, the whole line of reasoning in the opening paragraph, that logic, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Basically, that whole line of logic is opening up the Declaration and saying, sometimes it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have connected them with another. And it requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separate. So he's saying, we understand that this isn't something that should be done lightly or without great thought and preparation. And so, we're here to declare the causes, the reasons why we feel we should separate from Great Britain. The line of reasoning in the second paragraph is very powerful as well, very logical. And the counter argument, the concession, and the rebuttal that are in the second paragraph. This is where the most famous line comes from. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Then it goes on, and to secure those rights, governments are established, right? And they derive their power. Governments get their power from the consent of the governed, right? We consent, we agree that this person or this group of people are going to represent our government. They are going to be the ones who make all the laws and do all the things necessary to protect those rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if that form of government becomes destructive to those ends, meaning that that government is no longer protecting those rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then it's the right of the people to abolish it, right? And to institute a new government, right? And that new government, the foundation of that new government, will seem more likely to ensure life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that prudence, right, being cautious, will dictate that if a government has been long established, right, it's been around for a while, it shouldn't be dissolved. It shouldn't be changed for trivial reasons. That if you're going to make this kind of change, there has to be some really, really, really good reasons for doing so. And that a lot of people won't want to change the government. They would rather continue to suffer under it than to take that leap and do away with that government to create a new one. So we suffer, right? But that's not the right thing to do. You don't have to suffer. You can take that leap. And that's what they're doing. They're presenting all the facts to a candid world why they should separate. But he's presenting the counter argument there. The counter argument is, things aren't that bad, right? We don't, sure, things aren't great. We're just colonies. We don't have the same rights as all of our, brothers and sisters in Great Britain, across the pond. But is it really so bad that we have to, separate from them and become our own government? Like that seems really like a rash decision. That seems really big. That's too much change. And he's like, you're right. It is a big thing, So he's conceding the point there. He presented the counter argument, and he's conceding it and saying, you're right. It is a big thing. It's a huge decision. But that doesn't mean that we should continue to suffer. It is a big thing. It requires a lot of thought and a lot of preparation, and it's something that we have to be sure of. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And here are the facts that will prove to you why we should. Brilliant. Brilliant use of argument in that second paragraph. So more logic coming in that whole middle section where all of the reasons are listed. Just the fact of a list is almost logical, right? And every single one of them is very specific. So we're using a lot of specific examples to back up the claim. There's a lot of pathos being involved. Emotions, how the colonists have suffered, that word's used. The appeals to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, so we've got a lot of pathos happening alongside the logic. There's even ethos in here, the appeal to God and nature, right? That God and nature would side with us, in this matter. And I think he creates, Jefferson's not solely responsible for the Declaration of Independence, but at the same time, he did write it. But he kind of creates his own ethos just based on how eloquent he is and how perfectly he presents the argument. But that appeal to God and nature is probably the best example of ethos being used. If you're on, if you've got God and nature on your side, then you're probably doing the right thing. So a lot of different support techniques that are used, and it's so cool how that line of reasoning is so crystal clear. Those first two paragraphs, and especially the second one, are just, they're almost perfect the way he walks us through that line of reasoning, and how he is so easily able to present the counter argument, concede to it, and provide the rebuttal so quickly. And it makes it's like it just, you can't help but agree with it. And it's very insightful. It shows how reasonable they are, and I think it shows that there was a lot of thought put into the decision to separate. It's such a cool example of how all of the elements of argument can truly work together to form something so very effective. The claim is clear, the support is strong, and he doesn't just rely on one type of support. Like I said, the logic is so crystal clear, but those appeals to, what we need and what we want, the appeal to values is so clear. Even the use of pathos, he doesn't overdo it. He's got just enough in there to rouse some emotions, but he doesn't want to rouse emotions too much, because this needs to be a very rational decision, a very rational process. And getting everybody's emotions riled up could lead to problems. So it's very effective in that way. I hope you guys enjoyed reading through it and looking at it as an argument, and not just this wonderful piece of American history. That it does its job so very well, and that we're pretty lucky that we had, a group of men that could do this for us. So I'm very interested to see what your thoughts are after having participated in the weekly discussion and now watching the follow-up video. If you guys have any additional questions or comments, please let me know.